Hello there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Changing Minds podcast. This is me, Owen Fitzpatrick, and today we're going to be talking to you about, or not, we are not going to be talking to you. I am going to be talking to you. There's no we here, although you could argue that there's a multitude of voices inside my head. They're all angling to speak. We'll see which one becomes the boss voice. That's a callback to a episode earlier in this season. But today I'm going to be talking to you about a very important topic for those of you who are coaches, trainers, therapists, speakers, instructors, authors, or even if you're just promoting yourself on LinkedIn or promoting yourself on Instagram or promoting yourself somehow, some way, some shape, some form. In many ways, one of the most important skills these days is to be able to position yourself with a, let's say, brand, a personal, professional brand that establishes you as somebody worth listening to, otherwise known as a thought leader. And in this particular episode, I want to walk through some of the most important steps towards becoming a respected thought leader, someone who immediately people listen to you and they want to know what you have to say. They want to know your point of view. Now, let's first of all talk about the elephant in the room. Now, this room that I'm in currently is too small to have an elephant in, although I expect an elephant might just fit in here, but there wouldn't be much room for anything else. And if the elephant was here, it would probably, if it moved at all, everything would get destroyed. So currently, I don't have an actual elephant in my room, but to address the metaphorical elephant in the room, the first question would be, well, Owen, how can you talk about thought leaders? Are you a successful thought leader? And I would argue that I am in my own way. That sounds like I'm a good person in my own way. That's like a total cop-out. However, I have a bit of experience in this. And what I want to do is start off by, I suppose, sharing some of the things that I've done, not as a means to just impress you, although hopefully you'll be impressed enough to keep listening to the episode, but just to establish credibility from this perspective. So I started out as a therapist many, many years ago in the mid-90s, actually. And I started working with clients very early on as a psychotherapist, therapist. NLP, I would use with a lot of clients. I would use hypnosis, helping them to overcome their issues or problems. That was back in the day where you would put an advert in the local yellow pages, it was called, a phone book, basically, and occasionally get some articles written about me, especially since I was young. I was actually my late teens when I started working with clients. So because of that, I started working as a sort of expert very early on. And then as I suppose the internet came along in the early 2000s, I had a blog up. I think I wrote a few blog posts in the very early days. I didn't go near podcasting for a good while, but I did start a YouTube channel, I think, towards the latter part of the 2000s. And even before that, I had a sort of a newsletter that I would send out. I was marketing in different ways. I had a website, and I would be doing whatever I could at the time, learning the ropes in terms of how do you promote yourself effectively. So I suppose I've been a thought leader for about 20 plus years, 25 years or so. And over that time, obviously, I've had to build a business and adjust the business accordingly. As I did so, I learned a lot of valuable lessons. And I also spent a lot of money learning about running the business, learning about marketing, learning about selling, my approach, my way of thinking. Through all of that, I gained valuable insights in terms of what it takes to be able to be a successful thought leader. And not only did I build a successful business in Ireland, but when I moved to the States about 5 years ago, I was able to start from scratch over here and build a significant following and a very successful business over here as well. I have, I think, just over 10,000 followers on my YouTube channel, or subscribers rather. I have the same about on my Facebook page, a few thousand on my Instagram. And my TEDx talk, which I did in 2016, has now been seen by more than 1.4 million people. I've also written 9 books, which have been translated into over 20 languages, and I've spoken or delivered keynotes or talks or trainings in just over 30 countries to date. So all of that is to say that I have enough of experience to talk about the thought leaders concept as someone who has worked on myself in that sense and built a business as a thought leader. I've got hundreds of blog posts that I've written, hundreds of YouTube videos that I've recorded, and hundreds of podcast episodes that I've recorded. And also the podcast has been downloaded just over 300,000 times. So am I the number one or even in the top 100 thought leaders in the world? No. However, I believe that I'm definitely in a position where I can advise or share at least some of the strategies that I've used to get to where I am. And that's why I wanted to walk you through a number of different things that I think will be a benefit for you, different steps towards establishing yourself as a thought leader. So if you're already super successful and you're like, oh my goodness, Owen, I'm like the most successful thought leader in the world right now. And you're like, so far behind me, I've got like 2 million TikTok subscribers that love everything I do. And if you talk like that as well, for both the reasons of the fact that you're so successful and the fact that you talk like that, I would ask that you not listen to any more of this episode. But if you would like to learn some of the things that I've learned along many mistakes, a lot of spent money, a lot of wasted money, a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted energy, if you'd like to learn some of the ideas, then tune in. This will be useful for you. So first of all, the first step is to pick a primary content channel. So I'm assuming that you already have a level of expertise in your space. So now it's moving from an expert to a thought leader. So first of all, pick a primary content channel. And I would argue there's 3 core primary content channels. There's number 1, there's YouTube. Number 2, there's podcasting. Number 3, there's blog posts. And any one of those 3 could work well for you. You decide and pick. You can also do a combination. You can do it like I have now. This video is on YouTube, but it's also downloadable as a podcast on podcast platforms. But you pick a primary content channel. Now, if you're on Clubhouse and that's still buzzy for you, then great. That's an example. But these are long form content. This is anywhere from 20 minutes and up. Whereas the short form content is going to be something we talk about a little later. That's the social media channels that you choose to invest your time and energy in. But number 1, pick a primary content channel, something that fits what you're talking about. So if you're talking about style, for example, an audio podcast might not be the best approach or might not be the best way to go because it's a very visual sort of thing. What you want instead is you want more likely a YouTube channel on that. If it's very technical and there's a lot of steps to it and a lot of like words to it, maybe a blog might be the best approach. And for a lot of other things, maybe a podcast is the way to go. So you've got to figure out what suits you. What do you like the most? What do you feel you could do consistently? And also what fits your topic as well. Step 2 is do your research. That means try to understand whatever other people are talking about. Try to understand what your competition is talking about. Try to understand what's out there in the industry. Do your research on the various different elements and topics in your system. If you're an expert on sleep, understand everything there is to know about sleep. What are the challenges that people have in terms of sleeping? What are the reasons for insomnia? How do you deal with jet lag? What are the, biometrics that are related to getting effective sleep? What about the wearables? I've got the Oura Watch. I'd be looking at all of those as well. And you want to do as much research as you can with an eye up to what are the conventional, traditional default assumptions and practices, the best practices that are in the industry. And that's when we go to number 3. Step number 3 is develop a unique perspective. Now, this is also called by Nancy Duarte, who is the author of a number of great books, including Resonate, where she talks about using stories to make presentations. And Nancy Duarte is truly excellent. But as she talks about it, she says you need to develop a point of view. And so if you look at, for example, most of the great idea books, big idea books as they're known, Malcolm Gladwell, in terms of psychology, the likes of Adam Grant or whatnot, or Dan Pink, these are all people that have one core concept in their book. And as opposed to a framework book like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or a technique book, even like my own Charismatic Edge, or even Thinking on Purpose, which I wrote with Dr. Richard Bandler and Dr. Glenda Bradstock. If you look at the big idea books, which are all about one core idea, then often it's not just the idea, it's also the philosophy of that idea. It's not so much just one thought. It's also the fact that there's something about it that stands out, something about it that makes it different to the conventional approach. So in order to think differently, you want to be able to go do the research in terms of how are people normally focusing on this particular topic? What is the default way that people approach this? What are the assumptions, philosophies, and expectations of people in this area, in this industry? And then to develop a unique perspective, you want to go, what do I believe is wrong? So what do you not believe in terms of the whole industry, in terms of the normal default way to go? And what do you believe instead? And so what you're looking for is what differences can you bring to the table that no one else is bringing to the table? What is a unique frame of reference, a unique way of looking at things that no one else is talking about currently? And when you do that, when you identify what is different in terms of about your approach to what everybody else has said, that transforms the way in which you're able to grab attention, because people are more likely to pay attention to contrast. They're more likely to pay attention to something that they've not heard before or a take that they've not come across before. So what is your unique perspective? The second part of this is step 4, which is you need to make sure it's strong. It's a strong point of view. So you don't hedge your bets and go, some people say that the best way to lose weight is to stop eating too much fat. But actually, I kind of think you could also do it with carbohydrates, stop eating carbohydrates. Instead, you want to be very definite as to a strong point of view. Now, you want to obviously make sure it's accurate, because so often what people do is they have a perspective or point of view, but they want to be accurate, so they hedge their bets. They say, well, in one sense, this is true. In another sense, this is true. You want to find something that you have a strong point of view about that is counterintuitive. In other words, that it goes against the grain, that it doesn't feel natural and it doesn't feel correct, but yet it is. So you want to find a point of view that is unique to you, that challenges some of the status quo, but at the same time, it also reflects on something that you feel strongly about. So you've a definite, strong point of view. Because if you're kind of hemming and hawing and you're then that's going to be drowned out in a sea of people going on the internet these days and being absolutely convinced in whatever they say. And that's one of the problems these days, is a lot of people are so certain of their own point of view. And as a result of that, that tends to sometimes make them sound more persuasive, which is very, very disappointing for those of us who prefer to look at more nuance. It's one of the challenges I've had is number 4. It's something I'm still working on, but nonetheless, the more that you're able to work on it, the more strong and more conviction you demonstrate with what you do believe, the more likely you are to grab attention in that way. The next piece is to be able to solve the problems of other people. And this is one of the things that oftentimes most thought leaders that I've worked with struggle on this piece, because they fall into the trap of promoting the hell out of whatever system or approach that they use. So for example, if you're an NLPer that helps people to sleep better, then the problem is that you might be doing a lot of your content on how amazing NLP is. You teach people about NLP, you talk about different techniques and how great they are. And the reality is that your target market are people that have got insomnia, let's say. They don't care about NLP. And the only way that they're going to care is if they focus first on the problems that they're not being able to solve. In other words, they can't sleep. And as a result of that, the pain they're experiencing, and they've tried other things. So they've been at their wits' end, they've tried everything else, and nothing's worked. So then they come across, they're dying for something that will help them to sleep. And that's when you then position NLP as the very thing that they need at that moment in time. So what's really important is that you focus on the problem that you solve for people and the pain that those problems cause if they're not solved. And that should be a leading part of a lot of your content. You should not be creating content about your approach, but creating content about the problems that you solve and how you solve them, and provide examples or case studies or stories of people that you've worked with to help them with it, as well as providing an understanding in terms of what the problem is, what it leads to in terms of pain, why it happens, and therefore what your solution is and why your solution makes sense given the situation. That's what you want to generate, not just in your long form pieces of content, but also in your shorter form as well. And so because you want to be able to present that from a social media perspective quite easily, you also want to be able to explain the ideas simply and in an easy to understand way. So you might have, for example, a massive amount of expertise in an area, but what you want to do is you want to dumb it down and communicate it to the largest common denominator. In other words, how can you talk about whatever you're talking about, however technical it is, and how can you simplify it? Now, the way you do that is you go through the various different terminology and the verbiage of whatever your area is. If you're a physical therapist, for example, you've got probably an encyclopedic knowledge, if you're really good, of the human body with all of the different multisyllabic parts of our muscles, our bones, our hinges, our joints, the tendons, the ligaments, all that sort of crack. And what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to practice the art of explaining that simply so that anybody can understand. So a big part of this is for you to figure out how can you simplify the language, but a big part as well is how to use a metaphor. For example, recently I was a physical therapist and they were helping me to be able to improve my ankle because I had an injury on my ankle. And one of the things that they talked about was they were giving me a metaphor of exactly what was happening. And they were describing my tendon, and they were describing my ligaments, and they were describing what was going on. And they said, what happened was it's almost like there's a knot in the tendon or in a particular part of my leg. And whenever my leg was trying to protect my ankle when it got injured, that part of the leg immediately tensed up and tried to keep the leg still to protect the ankle. But in doing so, it's almost like it got to the point that it formed into a knot. We hear a lot of physical therapists talk about there's a knot in here. And it's just to describe part of it that's tense. The physical therapist actually described it to me as, imagine you're rolling through clay and there's a pebble in the clay, so you could actually feel it. But while he described it to me, it then became something that I could understand and conceptualize. Whereas if he gave me all the verbiage, I wouldn't have a clue what he was talking about. And so that's just an example that whenever you're trying to convey something, you want to be a master at metaphor. You want to be a master of translating whatever you are describing to them, both in terms of the problem and the solution, into something comprehensible that they can immediately get and understand. And therefore, they can understand exactly what value you bring and exactly how it works and exactly why it matters so much. Once you've done that, once you've mastered the art of explaining things in a simple and engaging way, you want to make sure that you're consistent in terms of the kind of work that you put out there. So you're consistently showing up. You're consistently showing up in terms of social media. You're consistently showing up in terms of whatever primary content channel you're on. And every time you interact with people, whether it's on your own social media channel or it's on someone else's social media post, or it's on your primary content channel like YouTube or the podcast or the blog, it's consistent. You're demonstrating your pedigree, demonstrating your expertise every single time. And engaging with your followers is the next step. When you engage with the followers, what invariably will happen is that you start to connect with them more deeply, but you're also learning a lot about what their thoughts are, what their questions are. The more you engage with your followers, the more you engage with others, the more that you'll discover what's most important to them. And then you can be more relevant to them. And the more relevant you are to them, the more they'll engage with you as well. The more you respond to them, the more likely they are to engage with you. So you want to engage with them and really try to understand the words that they use to describe their problems, because you'll notice a number of patterns. And as those patterns will help you understand how you can create content in the future as well. So it's a really wonderful way of becoming more effective at grabbing people's attention, is listen to the words that they already use. As well as engaging with your followers, you also want to engage with other thought leaders. Start to understand what your colleagues are doing. What are the topics that they're talking about? What are the trends in the area, the industry? Or what approach do they have to it? How is that different to yours? How is it similar to yours? What you're trying to do is you're trying to have a comprehensive overview of the various different ways in which they tackle the very same problems that you're tackling as well. And by doing so, that provides you with a really good ability to be able to craft and create content that resonates with people, because you're listening to what others are saying. And whether you agree or disagree, you're able to input it into your mind and figure out a way to be able to maximize the impact you have with your communication. Now, as you do this, you go to the next step, which is building the business. And building the business is really figuring out a way to be able to make the business work really, really well. At this point, you want to have your LLC or your limited company or whatever organizational structure you decide for it set up. You want to have your insurance. You want to understand your taxes. You want to have all your bank accounts in tow. You want to start working and building your website and getting that out there. You want to make it so that you're positioning and presenting yourself with a business that allows you to be able to start making money from this in whatever way, shape, or form you have it. And once again, maybe you already have the business and maybe all the steps that have just come beforehand are the ones that you need to start engaging in. But at this point, you already will have hopefully established a bit of a following, and now it's time to start to leverage that following to be able to earn an income from it. This is when you then want to build systems for your content creation. You want to make it so that you have a habitual way of doing things. You might want to record your video and then slice it up or get people to slice it up into smaller pieces, or you might want to create separate social media content to the long form content you use. But you want to redirect people to the long form content and preferably try to get them into a list of a newsletter or whatnot. You want to be able to, as quick as you can, try to capture emails. Emails are always a lot more valuable than the views on your YouTube, the listeners of your podcast, and especially more valuable than the Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn followers you might have, because then you're at the mercy of those platforms. So you want to make sure that you build systems for your content creation so regularly, daily, you are engaging with your followers and you're providing value in the marketplace, helping them to solve the various different problems and peripheral problems that they might have in your area of expertise. Then you want to develop a core message. Now, you might argue, well, is the unique perspective not the same as the core message? Well, after you've presented the unique perspective and also your strong point of view about things, as you interact and engage, and as you listen to more thought leaders and read more books, it'll soon become apparent of what parts of your message really resonate with people. And that's when you then start to work on and develop and cultivate a sort of a core message, a one-liner or a very simple phrase that immediately captures the imagination and the attention of your audience. You'll notice that when you start going out there talking, certain phrases will resonate more with other people than others do. So you want to be on the alert for what are the things that you're saying, the messages you're delivering that really strike a chord. And one of those could perhaps become your core message, the message that you want to deliver amongst everything else. You also then want to master your elevator pitch. Once you've got your core message, what does the core message help you to do and who are you primarily targeting? So the elevator pitch is, who am I helping and in what way am I helping them? And there's some great resources out there. There's some great experts out there. There's Mark Levy, who's an expert on this. There's another friend of mine, Neil Gordon, who talks about the silver bullet method. And Mark Levy's is the sexy pitch, your big sexy idea. And both of them are actually past guests on the podcast. So you can check out those interviews, but both of them are primarily helping you to differentiate yourself, which is ultimately speaking what an elevator pitch does. And it instantly allows people to know, who are you? What do you do? Who do you do it for? And how do you do it differently? And that's in a nutshell, an elevator pitch. But you can only really get that elevator pitch when you've done a lot of the other work and you've crafted a core message and you understand the industry in depth and have had enough conversations with stakeholders to figure it out. And then finally, you get out there. You look for every opportunity to speak, every opportunity to work with people, to coach, to train, every opportunity to engage, every opportunity on every podcast. You reach out and you try to get yourself out there in the marketplace. And you do so armed with your elevator pitch, armed with your core message. The danger is if you don't do some of the steps before you do this, then you go out there and you can even make a favorable impression, but people still won't know what you stand for. And so to be a thought leader that makes an impact, you need to be able to be very clear what you do stand for, very clear what makes you different to every other expert that could talk about this topic and why people should listen to you more than anyone. And when you're clear about that yourself, and that's true, a bit of iteration in terms of engaging with followers and engaging with other thought leaders and whatnot. And when you've done the work to identify what makes your perspective unique and different, and when you're focusing on applying that to solving people's problems, that will then in turn help you to be able to present your elevator pitch and your core message clearly so that people know exactly what you stand for and they want to work with you. And that's really what we're looking to be able to do. So it's vital that you start to implement that. So there you have it. There are some 12 steps towards becoming a very highly respected thought leader. It means avoiding some of the bullshit that can come with this, whereby people get into habits of posting obvious motivational quotes and expect that'll do the job. What people want to see is they want to see that you, amongst all of the other competition you might have out there, you're the person to listen to. You're the person to pay attention to. And I hope that you've paid attention long enough to me to allow this to be something that is beneficial for you moving forward. So for now, by the way, if any of you are interested in becoming mentored by me as part of what we call the Thought Leaders Mentorship, I have more information at changingminds.net. If you go to that website, you'll find one of the memberships is a mentorship where I work with a group of thought leaders. We meet twice a month and I help them to be able to master the art of positioning themselves effectively to build their thought leaders' businesses. We've got all sorts of different folks in there, coaches, consultants, trainers, speakers, in all different topics, from psychological topics. We have a wonderful dog training expert. We have a brilliant stylist. We have experts in terms of branding. And we have experts in terms of anxiety. We really have a whole host of a wonderful group of people that do on a regular basis make a difference to their clients. And I work with them on helping them build their businesses, help them identify how they can start to position themselves more effectively, create amazing content, everything from using ChatGPT and AI to how they can strategically plant themselves to think bigger, how to write books, how to create podcasts, all that sort of stuff. It's all in there. For more information, changingminds.net. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're keeping well. Hope everything goes great this week. And as always, may you continue to feel happy. May the force continue to be with you. And may you believe better. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.